We can hear you now, Brian.
Thank you. So, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Connected Cities, Metroisation of the Railways, with particular reference to the Northumberland line. Let me tell you that this event is being recorded, and if you do not wish to appear in the recording or indeed the live channel that's going out right this second, please do mute your microphone and switch off your camera. But if you wish to communicate with the speakers at any time during the speaking, please feel free to use chat. And if there is time at the end of the speaking period, we will pass on relevant questions. If there isn't, your opportunity to interact with the speakers will occur in the breakout rooms that follow the coffee break later on. So I will now proceed to move straight to the next group of speakers. There's actually going to be 6 speakers dealing with 3 sets of topics, but they all interlock, so it's one big presentation. We will begin with Stuart McNaughton, who is Strategic Transport Manager for Northumberland County Council, and he will be followed by Andy Coates, Regional Director of Rail Planning at ACON. Julian Sindel will follow on from there, and he will still be working with Stuart. And Kieran Duncan, who is a Senior Program Manager at Network Rail, and Paul McSharry, who's Managing Director of Kilburn Consulting, will talk about much more technical rail issues. And then finally, at the end, my colleague Camilla Ween from Connected Cities will talk about the vision that could be put in place to ensure that public transport, and particularly the railways, are at the core of all new development. So at this point, could I ask you, Stuart, please to take over?
Thanks very much, Brian. Can everyone hear me there? Yes? Yes, good. So Andy, can you, the first slide, is that available to see just now? Are the slides on screen?
I must admit, I can't
Andy,
see.
I think.
No.
Bear with us 2 seconds while we get the slides up on the screen.
Okay.
Oh, there we are.
Brilliant. Sorry for the delay. So thanks very much for everyone to join. It's a real pleasure to be here with you today, and it looks like a big attendance, so that's fantastic. If you move on to the first slide there, Andy, I can give people a bit of a background as to what we're aiming to achieve with this project, and in terms of the case for the Northumberland Line project. And Andy will give a bit of background in terms of the business case work that we've done to date, and then myself and Julian will talk through how we are and how we, going forward, how we're going to engage with the community, because the last thing we want to do is just put a railway in place and not think about the bigger picture in terms of what this means for the wider community. So that's really important to us. And then finally, Kieran from Network Rail and Paul McSharry from Kilburn Consulting will give a quick overview in terms of Network Rail's role on this, a third-party promoted project, and also what the key drivers and constraints are for this project. So, and if you can move on to the next slide, please. So in terms of the case for the Northumberland Line project, next slide. So hopefully a lot of you are familiar with the project, because it's been on the books for quite some time. You know, long-term aspiration to reopen what is currently a freight-only line between Ashington and Newcastle, the line that was last operational in 1964 for passenger services. And what we're looking to do, it's an 18-mile stretch of line between Ashington and Newcastle, and we're looking to reintroduce station stops at Ashington, Bedlington, Blythe Bebbside, Newsham, Seaton Delaval, Northumberland Park, potential to stop at the existing station at Manners on the way into Newcastle, and then Newcastle Central itself. And that's the scope of the project as things stand. Although one thing we are looking to think about is the art of the possible in terms of extending beyond Newcastle Central to improve connectivity, for example, to Hexham or down the Durham coastline. That's something that we're giving some thought to just now. But also that opens up strategic connectivity from southeast Northumberland to locations beyond, such as London. So I think it's really attractive, the opportunity to get on a train 6:30 in the morning in Ashington and be in London for a meeting by 9:30, 10 o'clock. So that's really key to the project as well. 3 key objectives to the project there. You can see access to jobs being vital for us. As I'm sure many of you will be aware, southeast Northumberland, areas of high deprivation, a job density within large parts of southeast Northumberland of 0.5. And what we mean by that is that there's half as many jobs within southeast Northumberland as there are of people of working age population. So what that means is that we need to ensure through our local plan that we encourage employers to relocate to southeast Northumberland, but also we give the opportunity for people within southeast Northumberland to travel beyond the area into Tyne and Wear to seek employment, and that's vital. But also, as you'll see there, sustainable mode shift from road to rail is vital for us as well. The A189 corridor, highway corridor, runs north-south through southeast Northumberland into Tyne and Wear, and that suffers from significant congestion, and particularly in the morning peak hour. And as an example of that, Ashington to Newcastle in the morning peak hour by both bus and by car in the morning peak hour is around about an hour, if not in excess of 1 hour. And as you'll see there from this slide, what we're going to get through the reopening of the rail line is around about a 35-minute journey time from Ashington into Newcastle. So that's a real step change in accessibility into Tyne and Wear, which has really helped to support the business case. And also in terms of economic growth is a key aspiration for us in terms of a significant increase in ability to access jobs, which enables business to grow across the area. And this aligns closely with the aspirations of the North of Tyne Combined Authority. And they were looking to achieve a 30-minute frequency, and I think that's the minimum you should be looking for in terms of a commuter passenger service. So that's the aim, what we're looking to aim for. And at the bottom point there, one thing, and this is becoming more and more important, is an aspiration for zero or low carbon rolling stock. And I think we need to reflect the climate emergency and our aspirations through the councils and across the region, the climate change action plans. So our ambition should be far in excess of the standard diesel rolling stock. There are opportunities out there in terms of alternative modes, rolling stock, and we're looking to see what the opportunity is there currently. So that's quite exciting, we think. Next slide, please. So as an example, I said there in terms of one of the key problems is accessibility from large parts of southeast Northumberland into Tyne and Wear. And what this plan shows is current accessibility by public transport from Ashington into Newcastle in the morning rush hour. And that blue patch at the southeast corner of that map shows areas that can access Newcastle in the morning peak hour by public transport within an hour. And anything not coloured there means that it's in excess of an hour. So as you'll see, Ashington poorly connected by public transport to Tyne and Wear, and given the low car ownership within southeast Northumberland, that's a real issue. So as you'll see with the next slide, Andy, a real significant step change, as you can see there. Large parts of Ashington now within access within an hour, and actually some areas within central Ashington down to about 40 to 50 minutes access by public transport from Ashington into Newcastle. So that's a real step change, and that's really helped to support the strong business case that we've developed and that Andy can talk through now.
We can't hear you, Andy. Are you muted?
There we go. I'd lost my cursor. That was my problem.
Ah.
I've now found my cursor. Right. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Thanks, Stuart, for that. I've just got a couple of slides here on more the how in relation to the business case. Stuart's given you a flavour of the what and why. So in broad terms, this is the work that we're doing. And this slide is just demonstrating the alignment in broad terms between the key rail processes that we need to run through. So it's all defined by RNEP, Rail Network Enhancements Pipeline, which is the process by which the government and the DFT procure and invest in rail enhancement schemes. This is basically something that was introduced in 2018 and is moved enhancements out of the 5-yearly control period process, which is now more focused on maintenance and renewals, and means that you sort of progress schemes through the through the sausage machine, as it were, with stage gates, which are those orange diamonds there. Those stage gates are informed by the business cases, and they are the key documents that sort of wrap all the work that's been done during those stages together to inform the decisions to develop, design, deliver. And I'll discuss the business cases a bit more on the next slide. The GRIP is Network Rail's project management process. It aligns with their project delivery lifecycle, which Kieran will outline in a bit more detail later. Again, they've got stage gates of their own to comply with there as owners of the assets. But it's important to acknowledge that GRIP is a process and there's a degree of interpretation in there. Indeed, RNEP actually states that scheme development doesn't have to align directly with GRIP, although there is in the latter stages, it will be informed by GRIP-related activities. The line in the middle there is just showing where we are in terms of the Northumberland line as we sit here today. We're now just starting into the design stage, so that's sort of the equivalent of GRIP 4, and we're moving towards a full business case. But there's a good example here of the sort of flexibility that it's not a rigid correlation in the sense that we're going to be producing a full business case to inform a design and build requirement to get a contractor on board. So we're going to sort of condense the design stage a little bit in terms of the full business case to inform a decision to deliver for a D&B contractor who will then do the detailed design and construction. So there's always a bit of flexibility around these. Bear with me. I'm just gonna... Right, so the business cases. Made up of 5 cases. The strategic case is where you emphasize the case for intervention, the case for change, and that's what needs to be demonstrated there. So you're putting in there, what is the problem, policy fit, what are the objectives, why you've arrived, in this case, why you've arrived at a rail solution rather than bus-based or donkey or aeroplane or whatever. You've got to home it. This is where you home it down. And then in the economic case, that's where you're demonstrating the value for money. So that's where you're bringing together the costs and benefits. It's a bit more quantitative at this stage. You've got detailed transport appraisal guidance from the DFT to which is basically the boundaries amongst which you've got to then bring your costs and benefits together. This is where the demand forecasting is done. The financial case is demonstrating the scheme is financially affordable, and there you're looking at the detail of the costs and looking at the funding. Commercial case, viability, procurement strategy, the balance of risks between different procurement strategies, that sort of stuff. Management case is asking the question, is the scheme achievable? So we're looking here at the governance, the assurance, stakeholder management, project planning. Now, the key thing here is that each stage of the process, the emphasis across those 5 cases changes as you progress the scheme. So at the SOBC stage, it really is about the strategic case. The focus is on the strategic case at that point and demonstrating the case for scheme. You might do a little bit of early feasibility work and some early quantification. Then you move on to the outline business case. And that's where you do a lot more quantification, more emphasis on the economic case in particular at that stage. And that's where you're homing down the various options to one preferred option, which you then take forward into the design stage. So that's informing the decision to design. You've got one option, this is the preferred one, it meets the objectives, etc., etc. And this then moves into the full business case, which is confirming the scheme's business case. And the key differences really between going from the OBC to the FBC is that that's where, because it's all in the detailed design, it's probably more the costs that are going to change than the benefits at that point. Sorry about that. So the next steps. So with this particular scheme, the OBC has now been approved by the DFT. We have a good, healthy business case, I'm pleased to say, with a good BCR. We're just some stats from the demand forecasting. We're forecasting between 2 and 3 million single journeys using the line by 2039. So that's annual journeys in 2039. We're forecasting around 20 to 25% of the Ashington-Newcastle market going by rail. And we're forecasting around about 45 to 50% of that rail demand coming from car, circa 20% coming from bus. So this has informed the decision to design. We've now we've got a tick in the box there. And what that does is it means we can move on to the next stage, the design stage of ARNEP, and it releases the funding in order to do that. So we've got the funding for Northumberland County Council, and we're hopeful of funding from the DFT from ARNEP as well. So we move into the design stage. The focus here is going to be on, in engineering terms, is going to be very much on the single option development, which is the, if you go back to the previous slide, was the GRIP 4 equivalent type work to get an approval in principle. There's a lot of planning and consents work going on at the moment. So planning, working towards planning permissions and TWA type stuff. The finalizing the moving towards a construction procurement, design and build appointment, which will be at some point next year. And then we're confirming the operating model. And so by that, what I mean is that the traditional operating model would be that this service would be operated by the Northern franchise. And that certainly is one option that we're looking at. But equally, and especially given the impending Williams review, whenever that goes public, there might be possibly different commercial environments, and we'll be and tapping into that. You know, at this point, we're pretty agile to all opportunities. So looking at something on the concession based potentially. And then obviously what's going to focus my particular mind is going to be producing the full business case, which will inform the decision to deliver, which will then allow us to procure a D&B contractor so that the scheme can progress. And we're aiming for a service start in 2023, 2024. So I will move over to Stuart again, I think.
I'll mute myself. Yes, so one thing we're looking to, as I mentioned at the start there, is engage with the community as far as practical, because the last thing we want to do is deliver a railway that's all it is, a construction project. We're not thinking around the bigger picture. So given the time we've got, I could talk around every single station location, but given the time we've got, I thought I'd just focus on two of the locations where we're proposing a station. The first one being Ashington. And what in effect this project does it completes the link with it for the regeneration of Ashington. We have Portland Park to the east of the town centre, where the new cinema is going in, a whole regeneration project within there, along Station Road to what we can see there is the site of the old station location. You can see the platform there, and also where the new station is largely going to be located. And above there is what's called Wansbeck Square, which is a huge regeneration project. So this is a real focus of activity in terms of what we can do to make sure that the Ashington as a station itself acts as a real destination in itself and helps to regenerate the economy of the town. But also one thing we're looking at is just to the south of Ashington Station there is hospital level crossing, which it's one of the examples we feel can act as a real stimulus for engaging with the academic community in particular, in terms of, because Ashington, a place of lower educational attainment, school children with narrow horizons in terms of what their future can hold, and we really want to use this project as an opportunity to change that. And that can be from engaging with the school children from an early stage in terms of raising awareness, in terms of the kids becoming school champions for the project, but also from things around educating the children around safety at level crossings, something we're really keen to do in collaboration with Network Rail. And also perhaps some school projects, some school competitions we're looking to do from the autumn. For example, helping to design a new bridge across the railway line and really engage the school children through that mechanism. But also talking to the children about future careers as an engineer, future careers in the rail industry, and also further academic research projects that could come from that. So that's a real key thing we're looking to achieve as well, as per, currently internal connectivity within South East Northumberland is really poor. So in terms of accessing college, be that Northumberland College or Newcastle College, one thing we're aware of in particular is from the Seaton Valley, for example, access by public transport from Seaton, Delville and Seg Hill to the colleges is poor. So we feel this can really act as a step change. Next slide, Angie. I think we're going to mix it up here and have a bit of a quiz. So if anyone's up for a quiz, pens at the ready. Just 5 quick questions that hopefully you can answer, and there'll be a prize for the winner at the end. So question number 1, Sir Daniel Gooch, one of the great engineers from the Victorian period, became Isambard Kingdom Brunel's chief locomotive engineer when still only 21 years old. Where was he born? The development and production of cheap, malleable iron rails, which were used on pioneering long-distance railways, such as the Stockton and Darlington Railway. Where did that happen? Question 3, when King's Cross Station opened in 1852, the very first train to leave was hauled by a loco built where? Question 4, the first train to run in Holland was built where? And question 5, the first train to run in Italy was built where? Now, if anyone said Bedlington for every single one of those, then you win a prize, because that's exactly what happened. So, the community of Bedlington are fully aware of and rightfully proud of the incredible history that Bedlington has in terms of the rail industry. But all they have to show for that history is what you can see in that picture there just now, so which is largely decaying former station at the heart of the community. And this is almost a prime example of what we're looking to work on in terms of engaging with the community and identifying what opportunities we can have to really have rail at the heart of Bedlington as a community going forward. And that's something that we're really looking to achieve through both the arts and the academic community engagement plans, which Julian will now talk through. So if I can hand over to Julian for the next slide.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon. I've been part of the project on the engineering team for the last 2 and a bit years on the project, and I'm pleased to say that really from very early stages, the whole engineering team understood that this was not just about producing a really good engineering project, but it's actually about using what we are doing to regenerate, re-stimulate the local economy. And that's really what makes the project exciting for us. I think there's a really strong sense of commitment from the whole team to deliver that opportunity for the local people. We have been looking at all sorts of ways in which we can make the railway work harder for the region. So for example, we've been looking at economic development opportunities at each station. And unlike many stations around the country, we don't have a lot of Victorian infrastructure to sort of refurbish and put sort of little community groups into. But apart from the buildings you saw in the Bedlington slide earlier, we've got nothing. So anything that we do build needs to be financially sustainable. That's one of the things right from the start. One of the other complications is that we're looking to take the project through a Transport and Works Act order, and within that we are constrained to what land we can take and for what uses it is, to only railway facilities. So economic development opportunity areas don't really fall within that. But we do have very strong tie-in with Advanced Northumberland, which is an arm's length
but a fully owned organisation by Northumberland County Council, and they already have land locally. So we're working with them to see how we can make best use of that. Northumberland County Council has also procured an economic corridor strategy study by Steer Economic Development Group, and that's really looking at ways in which we can take a strategic view as to how the whole region works together, building on some of the core and growing businesses that are in the area, particularly in terms of energy. There's wind technology is very strong in Blythe, for example, and there's some investments in alternative food products just down the road from Seaton Delaval. So there's some really interesting areas, growth areas there that we want to help the railway to help people to connect with. And we've been developing, or looking at developing, 3 particular focuses on different elements of the community. And that's the arts community, the academic community, and the business community. And the reason for doing that, the reason for targeting those areas is it's 3 very different groups of people, but all of whom, we stand to gain by engaging all of them and their relatives and friends in the project to drive ridership, but also to build ownership, really, of the whole railway by the community. And one of the things that enables us to do is perhaps tap into different sources of funding to that which the main project is being funded by. Next slide, please, Andy. So one of the first things that we thought we might do is build upon some of that heritage that Stuart was explaining earlier, and perhaps develop some sort of open source history project, which would then enable schools and local historians and local railway groups to kind of tell us what they know. And certainly from the public consultation events that we held last year, there are people up and down the railway who are just brimming with knowledge, many of whom actually travelled on the railway in the 1960s, just before it closed. So there is a strong sense of pride there. And so by working with the community to create this history project, we're hoping to unearth all sorts of interesting facts, and we've kind of done that already to an extent, but I'm sure there's many more to work to. And then from there, we thought we might use some of that information in a couple of really interesting ways. One to the right there to perhaps create a local documentary, a sort of BBC grade documentary, using perhaps a local hero to do the voiceover or interviews and so forth, to really help people realise what it is that they're sitting on and next to, and build pride there. But the bottom left image there just shows a sort of information board. And what we felt we might be able to do is to create a Northumberland line walking and cycling trail that runs from station to station to station, that people could go on a Sunday afternoon family walk from one to the next, and then catch the train back, and then maybe the next weekend come back and do the next bit, or maybe have sort of an annual charity event to walk as many of those as you can. And along the way, to build in that information from the history projects into the information boards there, to help people kind of understand some of that background history that they may just not be aware of. And then further building on that, you see the bottom right there, there's a local sculpture trail, but we thought we might go a bit further and build a bit of a tourist attraction alongside by engaging the arts community to help us with professional sculptures to create really interesting places that people can walk along and tag and show on Twitter and so forth, all really aimed at tapping into a different part of the community, helping them, and through art perhaps, through sculptures, showing the link between the railway and its community, and building that local pride. Next slide, please. And then engaging with the academic community, really from primary school all the way up to PhD level. You'll see there top left, it's ironic that the local primary school to Bedlington is called Bedlington Station, and there hasn't been a working Bedlington Station for the last 60 years. So there's a really important opportunity. This is their future that we are building this railway for. So there's a real opportunity to get in there at a local level and start educating a new generation as to how the railway might work for them. And then bottom left, we have Ashington Academy, the secondary school, And really what we're looking to do there is to help them to, again, think about how this might work for them, how this is going to help them get to careers, get to other forms of learning in the future, and to do so in a way that engages with them. A key thing here, of course, is safety on the railway. There are 23 level crossings on the route, and some of them are very close to the schools. So we have to help students to know how to get on a train safely, how to cross level crossings safely when there are many more trains. Some of the research we've done indicates that actually for years 12 to 14, the most effective way there is not people like me as engineers coming in, wagging our finger and showing a video of people getting run over at level crossings. It's actually about enabling 12 to 14-year-olds to teach their peers about safety on the railway. And then top right, we have the local Newcastle College Rail Academy, sometimes known as the Gateshead Rail Academy. And we're very hopeful that some of these apprentices will be able to come and join us both in the design team going forward, but also on site. And there's a really good opportunity to encourage people to use their skills on a local railway. Bottom right is some PhD research images from Newcastle University. They have a special rail unit, and this railway offers them a great opportunity to do what researchers need to do, which is to measure the before, during, and after for each part of the railway. And there's all sorts of areas of research that people could work in, both in terms of heavy duty rail kind of issues, technology and materials and so forth, but all the way through to the whole teaching and engaging with local schools, measuring effective ways of teaching STEM subjects, and in this case, railway engineering, perhaps, to local school children. So there are a huge range of economic and social research projects just waiting to be had in this, and we want to tap into the universities for it. Next slide, please. And then there's the business community engagement plans. And so there are a number of different ways I think we can really help. Many of the local businesses, there's a photo on the top left there, here is from the street in Bedlington. And many of these local businesses have had just passing trade for many years. And they're suddenly going to be given a huge opportunity to tap into a different kind of customer, a different time of day, perhaps, when they can expect to be able to sell their wares. And what we're looking to do is to see if we can create opportunities for local business surgeries to enable drop-in or go and meet businesses to help them maximize the opportunities that they will have, whether that's employing new staff or providing a slightly different offer. And we'll be looking to go in to talk to them 12 to 6 months beforehand, so they've got time to adjust and prepare for how they're going to maximize the value to them of this railway. Bottom left, we're looking to help create opportunities for startups, and the economic development opportunities I mentioned earlier are part of that, so that we are not just helping to improve existing businesses, but we're helping to create opportunities for new businesses to erupt. And then top right, we have Newcastle Central Station. It's about enabling those who live along the line to access wider jobs in the region, perhaps by dropping down to Newcastle Central and then on from there. And then bottom right is the logic model from the STEER work that's ongoing. And that's really about creating a coordinated approach across the region to maximizing the value of this. So that's the last of my slides. So next one, please. I'm not sure if we've got Kieran, so I can carry on if that's all right.
Kieran's here, he's just muted.
Oh, there we go.
Still muted. Still muted.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much. Apologies, I've had some IT problems this afternoon, so apologies if I've been a bit little bit late joining the conference. From Network Rail's perspective, just really want to talk through on this current slide as to how we operate through the Department for Transport, how we operate through train operators, etc. One of the things that I think is important about the Northumberland line is the fact that we're making the best use as we can of a railway that exists today, but also how we're going to hopefully bring that into better fruition in the future. One of the things that people have been obviously keen on in the past is how Network Rail can be often potentially a blocker for schemes, but in the case of the Northumberland line, building on Julian's points, I think the important thing to say is that we're bringing in a railway here, or we will hopefully fund that to bring in a railway that ultimately serves maybe more than 1 million people on opportunities and ambitions they've never had for 30, 40 years. Network Rail in itself has to work very closely with the department, with train operators, with various freight companies as well, to actually go through various government processes to see how this works. But at the end of the day, I think the important thing is that we really need to think about how we can put passengers first, how we can engage communities, engage towns and cities across the region. And one of the things that the Northumberland line gives us the opportunity for is actually really bringing about a transformational change to a part of the network or part of the world that maybe hasn't seen that previously. I remember when I was in charge of building a new station at Corby in the Midlands, and I remember when the mayor said to me, he said, "Kieran, do you know what you've just done?" I thought, oh goodness me, here's another conversation around how Network Rail can't do things. But what he actually said was, you don't realize you've just changed the environment and changed the working lives of 250,000 people. And that is so important for me and so important for Network Rail in terms of understanding how we can support and assist the regional economy. There's a lot of governance, there's a lot of process, as you see on the slide in front of you, but in my head, and I think in Network Rail's head, and particularly under our stewardship via Rob McIntosh, who's our regional managing director, there's an awful lot that we want to be able to do to show how the railway can really support, really help, and really strive to build better communities across the network. Next slide, that'd be great. So Network Rail recently have just gone through a bit of an organisational change to understand and work better with local communities, local stakeholders. On the map on the left, you'll see how Network Rail are structured in terms of regions. But looking at the map on the right, that's how we work together with partners in the industry, specifically around what I classify as the North and East route. So I'm the principal program sponsor, specifically looking at enhancements across the North and East area. I'm looking at, as well as the Northumberland line, we've got some very exciting and major developments in the Darlington, Middlesbrough and Tees Valley area, together with the work that we're doing at Leeds, together with the work that we're looking at with third-party deliverers, specifically around 4 or 5 new stations in the Yorkshire area. So we're all part of trying to make certain that the network does what it says. It gives people the opportunity to interface with the railway, as Julian quite rightly states, in terms of jobs and futures. But also, you know, could anybody have ever thought about a journey from somewhere like Ashington or Bedlington to King's Cross within 3.5 hours? You leave Bedlington at 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning, and by 10 o'clock you're in London. And that is all about connecting cities. It's not just about Newcastle or places along the route. It's all about actually bringing people, bringing economy, bringing jobs into areas that historically have not been well served by the railway. Next slide, please. So Paul will take us through some interesting challenges that we have on the route. It's a railway that was built for passengers, but it's now a railway that's predominantly operated by freight users. Lots of different level crossings, and as Paul will explain, we have technology there that dates to well over 160 years of types of signalling. We've got quite a lot of single track railway, which limits the capacity. We've got freight. And one of the things about the freight is this isn't about freight that brings lots of goods and lots of services to the economy. Part of the freight that is used on this route actually supplies the UK power industry through bringing in pellets and biomass from North America to feed the Drax power station. And actually Drax itself utilizes more than 10% of the current UK supply in terms of electricity to the industry. So we've got to marry in, and we've got to work together with freight operators and train operators to make sure that not only are the passengers in the southeast Northumberland area, but also the freight users for a very prime part of the economy. Next slide, please.
Just to let you know, we're running a little bit behind schedule. So if you could take that into account, please. Yeah, sure. So I think the final slide here is really saying that Network Rail and its new role around, not its new role, but its role that's always been there around putting passengers first. We really want to work with Northumberland Council, the train operators, the freight operators, local stakeholders to really build a new and important part of infrastructure that will bring economy benefits, it will bring people benefits, but also the fact that we're trying to do this in a different way by being more collaborative
and working with stakeholders in industry to really bring this part of Northumberland into a modern transport system. And that's the end. Thank you.
Hi, it's Paul McSharry here. I'll take over from Kieran. Thank you, Kieran. My organisation has been working on the level crossing and signalling design work up to date, and we're working on behalf of ACOM and Northumberland County Council, obviously, and it's been a pleasure to be involved in the project to date. And for those of you who've been waiting for your techie bits, engineering bits, and especially a bit of old engineering, then this is the bit for you, and we've kept the best till last. As Kieran's implied, using a little extract of the map before, there's a really significant mix of legacy signalling and level crossing control kits on this line, which is all going to present us with some challenges, and this page actually is all about challenges. Mechanical signal boxes, which as has been alluded to, from the 1900s, sorry, yeah, 1800s actually, yes indeed, and quite a mix of signalling, quite a few semaphore signals, which you might even get to see in a minute, you lucky things. And a lot of the line, because of the history of passenger trains being withdrawn in the 60s, some of the features now are not suitable for running passenger trains, and that's another challenge for us. As been alluded to earlier, there's freight trains running on the line only now to and from Linemouth, and also from Morpeth to Fort William. Yeah, the level crossings, that 23, I think, level crossings, and the list is significant. There's a wide range of level crossings, from footpaths in fields right through to significant highway crossings, which are going to present us with a challenge. And those protection arrangements and risks at the crossings that exist now really reflect the current usage of the line in terms of freight only and current road and pedestrian use. So again, significant challenges as we start to introduce freight passenger trains into the mix. As Kieran showed you on the section of the little map earlier, there's a significant section of single line which restricts the capacity of the line, and one of our challenges is to achieve the aspirations of Northumberland County Council for timings of trains into Newcastle. And so there's going to be some double tracking, an additional loop, some line speed increases where we can achieve them, and we're bringing sections of the line up to 65 miles an hour wherever we can. Obviously, there's some really significant curves which won't suit 65 miles an hour at all, otherwise it'll be very messy. In fact, I think one of the curves is going to take us down to 20 miles an hour, or 10 or 20, and unfortunately that can't really easily be resolved without spending a lot of money on it. There's a single lead junction at Benton North on the East Coast Main Line, and that presents a problem with feathering trains to and from this line onto the East Coast Main Line. And obviously the train has got to arrive at Newcastle, and that's also got to fit in with the existing services on the East Coast Main Line without causing other train operators inconvenience. So lots of challenges there. Next slide, please. So here we go. These are the photographs you've been waiting for, and I think I get the prize for the best photographs. This collection of photographs shows you the kind of infrastructure we're dealing with. Bedlington North signal box, quite a key one for us in terms of its arrangements and what it's controlling, and we're spending a lot of time thinking about how we can engineer the scheme around the existing infrastructure. You can see the lever frame right slap bang in the centre of the picture there. That is from Bedlington North. A couple of semaphore signals, which are dying out across the network, but we've got quite a few on this line, which are going to present a challenge for us. And then the two level crossings on the right, Holywell, which is on the single line section, that's going to need significant intervention, which is currently an AHP, and Bevside as well, which is going to need some significant intervention. That's on the double track line at the moment. So they're the lovely techie photographs that I'm sure you've been waiting for. Next slide, please. And very quickly, this shows you the extent of the works we've got to do to the level crossings. So Holywell's on there, and Bevside is on there as well. And you can see that the risk arising from the introduction of passenger trains creates a significant change in the risk profile at the level crossings compared to what they are now, as I was suggesting earlier. And the change in risk profile means we've got to undertake some significant upgrade works. And you can see in red where we're going to have to do some upgrade works, and that's quite significant. And some of them are going to the latest manually controlled barriers with obstacle detectors that Network Rail have introduced in recent years as the safest method of level crossing protection. But significantly, as we would all be encouraged to do when we're doing infrastructure work, we're looking to close crossings wherever we can. And that is a big policy driver for Network Rail, close crossings where you can. So there's a good bunch that we're going to try and close, and certainly that will be significant in reducing risk, because some of these are already relatively high risk. They will be made even higher risk unless we do something about them. So that's why you can see where there's a good mix of works that we need to get on with. Next slide, please. And just some final thoughts from the designer, really, and working with Kieran's team at Network Rail. Our role as designers to support the sponsor is to unite or marry up his aspirations with Network Rail's requirements. As it says, aspirations versus obligations. And we've got to tread the path between what the sponsor wants to achieve and what Network Rail is willing to accept and approve. And that's often a tricky path, but that's what we specialise in. I think from a technology point of view, we're looking at evolution and not revolution. We're certainly not thinking of blue sky solutions. I've been on enough projects with novel solutions, and I've learned never to be first. So we won't be introducing anything new to this scheme because that would just last the programme and the cost that we suspect, and probably isn't in the best interest of the people that we've been talking about earlier on in these slides. So we're going to rationalise and modernise some of as much as we can of the signalling system, but efficiently and economically as well. We'll obviously got to achieve compliance, because that's vital, and that goes back to the first bullet point about our obligations with Network Rail. We must achieve compliance, and because this is a project that's being progressed through the RNET process that Andy was talking about earlier, we've got to work with Network Rail, alongside Network Rail, and collaborate with them, and they've got a crucial role in helping us approve or review and approve the technical details of the scheme, and that's done through what's called ASPRO arrangements, and which is asset protection. And so far to date, we've had some fantastic engagement from Network Rail team, which is vital to getting us to the stage that we're at now in terms of design proposals that we believe they will finally sign off to support the scheme. And compared to a number of ASPRO projects that my organisation has been involved in, I think it's fair to suggest that this one has been a bit of a beacon in that area so far. So long may that continue. The relationships are working very, very well. I think that's my last slide. There you go. Thank you.
Brian, I think you need to unmute yourself.
Hello. Yes. Thank you very much, everybody. Greatly appreciated all your input. We do have one brief question, which relates to the images we saw just now. Don Kent has said that we have two beautiful signal boxes at Bedlington, which he presumes will become redundant. Is that actually going to be the case, please, Paul?
We're looking at options for control point for the line, or various control points, and under the heading of rationalisation, it's possible, for example, that Bedlington South may end up being the control centre for part of the line. It much depends on a number of factors to do with capacity at the existing boxes and what we do at other level crossings.
So it's not guaranteed that they'll become free. Fair enough.
It's not guaranteed. Sorry, no.
Thank you. All right.
Okay. It's Kieran Duncan from Network Rail. Just on that particular point, is that one of our principles on improving railways of this nature is that we try and preserve heritage as best as we can. So, for example, on a recent scheme that I've been involved with to re-signal the area around Hebden Bridge in Yorkshire, we've actually taken the lever frame out, and we're donating it to North Yorkshire Railway, but also the local council and local community volunteers have actually decided to take the signal box on as like a heritage community centre. So whilst the old 160-year technology might go, we're trying to do what we can with local people to turn it into something that's a bit more valuable for the local area.
Excellent. Oh, thank you very much. I'm delighted to hear that. So I will move on to our final speaker at this stage then, which will be Camilla Royals. And this point about making use of heritage links into the kind of thing she'll be talking about. So at this point, Camilla, could I ask you to move forward, please?
Yes, I don't know where my slides are. John, have you got my slides? Brilliant. Thank you.
We have them. Yes.
Excellent. So yeah, continue on. Next slide. I think I'm going to have to go next, aren't I? So basically, what I'm going to cover is sort of what and how, basically to describe the kind of goals and opportunities that could be presented by the Connected Cities methodology. And then I'll describe in sort of a little bit of detail, but not too much, the principles of the Connected Cities. And then finally, sort of looking at the area that we've been talking about and how a connected city might work in that area. Next. So, I mean, the key thing is about the Connected Cities project and methodology is that it's about focusing growth around existing railway infrastructure. So it's either operational and in some cases it could be closed lines. So basically there is a lot of it in the UK and it basically presents opportunities and with modifications, relatively inexpensive modifications, you can put the railway back into use and start the kind of projects that we've just been hearing about. But I'm going to talk a bit more about how the development opportunities come on the back of all that. But there are some 300 closed railway lines across the UK. So that's the situation. It's a huge opportunity to actually move growth and development towards a non-car based version, so actually public transport oriented development. Right, next. So the core philosophy of the Connected Cities is thinking about future growth requirements, but it's very much about a sort of good growth model. So something that will develop sustainable cities, low carbon living, as far as possible, designing out car dependency, ideally completely, and designing in access to public transport. And you'll see how that works in a second. So it's basically bringing together good public transport, good town planning, and good urban design within one model. Next, please. So the actual garden cities or the Connected Cities model is based on the garden cities principle of having access to green infrastructure and walking, cycling, and nature as such. They're moderately sized settlements, so not necessarily very big, but you'll see how many of them can fit together to form a connected city. Not car dependent, as I said, good public transport. And then the key thing is everything is linked together by about a 15-minute journey. So that is the key, and that's where the railway comes in, because you can have other settlements that are 15 minutes away by rail and they can cluster together to form a sort of connected city. So next, please. The ethos is very much about livable neighborhoods, green, but with sort of street life and human interaction actually happening on the streets rather than being car dominated. Places where people can meet and for children sort of play in the street, and everything within a sort of walking distance of a station, ideally. So 15-minute walk to a station that will then take you to the next part of the connected city. Next. So these are just a few of the sort of principles, but it will give you a rough idea of what a connected city might be. So a number of ped sheds that could be connected together. So it could be any number of ped sheds connected together by 15-minute railway journeys. But each ped shed is a small to medium-sized settlement with, so the red kind of arcing line is potentially the railway line on which you're developing. So it could be a new station, and at the center there's a dense mixed-use core where you'd have mixed-use facilities, so office and potentially some residential, you know, and other leisure facilities and hospitals and whatever you might want. At the center of the ped shed is a railway station. And actually the key thing is that once you decide where to put your new railway station on the existing railway line, the development only extends up to 1 kilometre away from that station so that you can maintain that sort of 15-minute connection. But then within the green one shows how the wedges could come in between the housing so that you have sort of small village type housing separated by green wedges which you can walk across and access and so on. And then within the sort of medium part of the ped shed, you'd have distributor roads, so local access for transport, for local access transport deliveries and so on. And actually on that road is also where you would get sort of all the local amenities like shops and pubs and things that you would want to access on foot from your home. So when you put all those sort of principles together, you get a sort of pinwheel like the one on the right, which, you know, will vary from place to place, which will basically take consideration of what is already there. So if there's any heritage or there's any existing constraints like physical constraints like floodplains or whatever, they would all be designed in and around that. So it's coming up with a sort of the sensible solution according to what you've got. And one of those sort of ped sheds, potentially the one shown, is something in the region of 22,000 people. Next, please. So for example, these pictures show some idea of, for example, where on the left, you've got an existing town with an existing station, the yellow station sort of at the heart of it. But by adding stations up and down the line, either side of the existing station, you potentially unlock the potential to actually increase the growth of that station, of that town. And you know, you might actually be including part of the existing town, but also part of the countryside into a new settlement. And the picture in the middle sort of shows that you can have sort of different sizes of settlements all connected together by 15 minutes railway journey. So you might have a hub town which has more of the bigger facilities that you would expect, educational, university, hospital or whatever, and then the smaller sort of sister towns which perhaps have less of the facilities. But if you live in a sister town, you would be only 15 minutes away from the hub town to access your local hospital or whatever. And the one on the right sort of shows again how that principle allows you to kind of take existing towns and you sort of build around existing towns and spread out, but without creating sprawl. This is all about creating development that is public transport accessible. Next, please. And that just shows very clearly wherever these settlements are, the principle is that it be a 15-minute railway journey. So it depends also a bit on the type of railway infrastructure you've got, whether the trains can travel faster, whether they're going to be traveling slow. We heard about, for example, speed restrictions with curves and so on. So, I mean, it's a flexible thing. You have to look at what you've got and you tailor it around. But the principle is you don't go more than that 15 minutes away, because then the connected cities principle is completely lost and people will start traveling by car. Next, please. So we've had a look at sort of Tyne and Wear and how that might be, how you could use the methodology, particularly along the Northumberland line. So you'll see, next please. So a key thing is that, and what Connected Cities is thinking about, is that this future growth for the UK. So the predictions are currently that by 2050, the UK is going to be 80 million population, which is an increase of about, over 13 million. And most of these people are going to be living either in cities or very near to cities, either sort of existing, expanding, or new settlements. And it will be a sort of mix of where we actually eventually end up putting all that growth. But it's a very big number, and it's got to be something in the region of 250,000 new homes every year until 2050. So that is why we need to think about this now and think about it in a sustainable way, but also in an affordable way. Next, please. John, next, please. Right, so Tyne and Wear. So the sort of conurbation, having looked up what the internet tells us, is it's about 1.14 million, which the only way at the moment to think about how much growth you're likely to have. But if you look at it in a sort of pro rata across the whole of the UK, you could imagine that it's something like 230,000 new people have got to be accommodated within the sort of greater Newcastle area, or 115,000 homes. So that the Northumberland line alone could potentially accommodate, we think, maybe a third of that requirement. Next, please. So the key thing is that the Northumberland line, with this sort of upgrade that's going on, it really offers this incredible opportunity, a sort of once in a lifetime opportunity to bed in parallel with the railway upgrade, good growth. And Blythe, the town of Blythe, city of Blythe, has the potential to be a sort of hub town, the great sort of greater Blythe connected city within this whole length of the railway. And I'll show you why in a sec. Next, please. So this is the area, and we're looking obviously at the northern bit. So from Cramlington up to Ashington, roughly, or well, a bit south of that, actually. It's, I've forgotten the name of the station now, where it branches off, where it starts at the edge anyway. So that section, so the potential is to develop along there, to develop connected cities along that railway line that will provide some of this growth. Next, please. So this is the sort of railway network at the moment in the greater area, and it's quite rich compared to many places. So there's huge opportunity to actually exploit what is already there. Next, please. So in the center of the bit of the railway line that we've been talking about is Blythe to the east of it. And Blythe has the potential to become a sort of connected city with sort of satellites along the line. And so that shows you kind of where it is and the new stations along. And the orange station, or the orange circle, represents a sort of hub station for the connected city, and the connected city spreads up and down the line. Next, please. So there you can see the extent of Hythe at the moment, and by putting in potentially extra stations, you could also then expand the city outwards and probably almost double it in size, and it will still be accessible to railway infrastructure. So it's about siting where that growth is so that you don't just get sprawl that will encourage people to drive to the nearest railway station. Next, please. So that's the whole line as we've been talking about. And at the bottom, you'll see that you've got Seaton Delaval and the little sort of orange misshaped kind of area, which is the potential growth area for Seaton Delaval. So that would be a new green quarter for the Seaton Delaval area. Next, please. So that is sort of zooming in to where the station would be. And you can sort of see that very roughly, the red line being the railway line, that, you know, about half of what's within the 1 kilometre circle is currently unbuilt upon. So the potential is to build a connected city along, but very much along the lines of a sort of new green quarter, so lower density perhaps than some other places, but that you would exploit the green infrastructure that already exists there, and that could probably give you about 25,000 new people accommodated. Next. And then moving up, you come to Blythe itself, which you mentioned. So again, and at the bottom, the lower of the green circles is actually Newsham, which would also be a new green quarter. So next, please. So, and again, you're seeing the similar kind of thing happening, that roughly half of it is green, but you do have a floodplain at the southeast corner, and you've potentially also got some floodplains in the center, I think. But there's the potential there probably to add in sort of about 20,000 new people. Next, please. And then going to this sort of middle of Blythe, so that which would be the Bebbside hub. Next, please, which is the orange circle. So within that hub, you can see again what you've got is you've got green on the west, but you've got sort of fairly built up, and it looks like some light industrial, fair amount of light industrial as well on the edge of Blythe. And it's sort of pretty much carved through the middle by both the railway and the highway. So you could get some development in the green zone. And I think the idea would be to create a green quarter there that's close to the existing part of Blythe, but you know, it perhaps wouldn't be as dense as somewhere else. So about 15,000 people accommodated. Next, please. And then Bedlington, which is just north of where we just were. So that would be a town growth centre. So zone. Next slide, please. So you can sort of see that here you've got not so much land to the north, but there is some, and there is the potential, and you've also got blue and green infrastructure that could be exploited. So there's the potential there to create a sort of town growth zone, and that might be possibly higher density than some of the other places we talked about. I mean, it's what's appropriate for this place, but you could potentially accommodate another 5,000 people there. Next, please. And then going up to the end of the line that's being considered at the moment at Ashington. So that area there, you could get another growth zone happening there. So next, please. And here you see that station is showing, you know, not a lot of development potential. It's quite dense already. So the idea would probably be that you'd fill in fairly dense, taking account of what's there. I mean, it looks like on the sort of northwest side, you've got some light industrial, but it's actually, again, you know, taking advantage of the situation and of the access to the station, and creating, potentially accommodating another 5,000 people. Next, please. So this is the sort of tube map. I don't know what you actually call these diagrammatic railway maps these days, but showing all the red lines are potentially new lines or upgraded lines, I suppose. But I mean, I think the really interesting thing is that it shows that the whole wider network is already very well served, or potentially going to be very well served by railway infrastructure. So rather than thinking about, if you're thinking 30 years hence and Newcastle just sprawling out and absorbing that extra sort of 250,000 new people, but that it actually instead would create, that you would create the sort of connected cities type approach to growth, where you're creating sort of satellite settlements that have their own character and that respond to the local situation. And we've only looked at that northern branch, but I mean, there's potential obviously to the south of Newcastle to apply a similar approach. And you could probably accommodate all the growth requirements for the greater Newcastle area sort of on railway. Excuse me, my voice is giving up. I think I'm done. Is that the end?
Okay, well,
It is the end, yes.
It is, yes.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, so yeah, the only final thing to add because of that slide is that there's a lot more information about these principles on the Connected Cities website. And if you want to connect to it, just type into Google Connected Cities as all one word, and then you'll come straight to the website. Right, we haven't got time for any more questions at this point, but what we will do is we'll move on to the break, and that will be followed by the breakout discussions with speakers. However, at this point, what we would very much like you to do is to choose which of these 4 breakout rooms you would like to attend, be in. Just type a single number into your chat and then hit return. And so type number 1 if you want to be with Stuart McNaughton and Andy Coates. Type just number 2 if you want to be with Julian Sindel. Number 3 for Paul and Kieran. Or number 4 to discuss matters with Camilla. So if you could do that now, we would be immensely grateful. There will be a break at this point, and it's now just gone 4:45. So the coffee break will end at 5 o'clock. So at 5 o'clock, please return. And what we will do is we will then go straight into breakout rooms. We will have the conversations in breakout rooms and then finally come back together for a very quick Q&A at the end. So thank you very much for everybody who's spoken. Thank you very much for everyone who's written in the chat, and look forward to seeing you all after. But please don't forget to say which breakout room you would like to be in. Thank you very much, and see you all at 5 o'clock.
I'll do my best.
Okay, very thanks. Right. Fine. Well, I actually, surprise, know Camilla. We do talk occasionally at a distance. So would anybody else like to speak to her, please?
Am I now?
It's not like you not to have a. Yeah.
So are you? Am I live now?
Yes, we
You
can
are.
hear you, Nicholas.
Okay. Okay. I raised several questions during a very interesting set of presentations about the fundamental difficulties of the area being economic. Decline of probably greater than any other part of the country because of the long-term decline of the coal mining industry. And it does seem to me that one's dealing with people who will have many of whom will have very low self-esteem. I have never read anything more depressing than going on to look at if you start looking at, would I like to live here? You find that people are very miserable. So it seems to me there is a great danger raising expectations because there are so few shows in town. And I wonder whether it doesn't raise the question of how in areas which really are left behind, one shouldn't be taking a very different approach to areas which really got rather more in terms of growth prospects, which would be measured in things like low values, development costs, and so on. And it seems to me, unless one recognizes that from the beginning, there is a danger of things being rejected. If the railway were ever reopened, then it would be vandalized and so on. And I raised a question whether the wider issue of connectivity, of getting people to make it easier to walk. I remember when I've been working in Barnsley, seeing again resources being spent on things which were low priority and very expensive and long term, and quite easy things being neglected, this in Grindthorpe, for example. So it's a more general proposition that we should be rethinking the way we classify areas in terms of growth or regeneration, so that we don't think that it's just about plonking houses down wherever there is space. And so I know the Newcastle area quite well in a way, because we've done case studies in Gateshead and Newcastle, worked on working on Walker Riverside and so on. So it's not that I'm naive to the issues, and or don't believe there are very good prospects for development. I'm just not convinced that building the railway will be the best way of getting growth. which doesn't mean to say we shouldn't be finding cheaper ways of making it easier to bring back passenger services on an underused line. Does that all make sense, or is that too complicated?
Well, should I just chip in? I mean, I think, yes, the issue of kind of low esteem and the public that you're looking to attract and to serve, the way you engage with them is going to be absolutely key. And several of the speakers talked about sort of community engagement, but I mean, I think it's very much about having a really good program of community engagement, so that actually people who are already living there, so not the people who are moving in, but the existing population, take a sense of ownership and pride in what is happening in their area. And that is, it's about, you know, not raising expectations absurdly, but offering and listening to what people really want, and trying to demonstrate that through good urbanism and design, you deliver some of those things so they get a sense of satisfaction and excitement and that sense of ownership. I mean, anybody else want to chip in on that one? Because it's a difficult one.
The whole area, you're absolutely correct, is, you know, economically very deprived. It's been rolling on since the 1980s and the mass closure of just about everything. But what has arisen in its place is a series of car-based commuter developments which sit alongside the sort of post-industrial areas. And they really are often quite distinct communities within the same sort of geographical boundaries. And Ashington's a great example, with a lot of new car-based developments around the Spine Road to the east and to the west near Morpeth, but the centre being post-industrial. And it's those two communities that the line's got to engage with. It's pretty easy to engage with the car owners and the people who are travelling to Newcastle for work, but it's a lot harder to engage with the former mining community, often who didn't have a great, they didn't travel a lot anyway, you know. And in many ways, Camilla's sort of plan is almost like how it used to be pre-car, where, you know, you were basically lived within about a mile of where you lived, and there were one or two things that were further away.
If I could just respond, I don't want to appear negative or too gloomy, though I do call myself an economist. But it seems to me that if you start with young people, as I did, for example, in Grimethorpe, we were able to engage young people in their idea of having a Grimethorpe activity zone using the former Minor Institute. And instead of dealing with the community as an anonymous whole, you start with people who do have a future, and in that case, engage positive-minded people. Also in Elsica, I remember we did the similar sort of thing. So, but it's really starting with the people's needs and then working back to the projects using underused resources, rather than this awful business that we have of very complicated procedures, which it seems to me are designed to evaluate projects against the whole of the country rather than against the priorities and needs of a community. And so I would like to think that Connected Cities can begin to rethink the process so that we do see there's a real difference between growth areas like Oxford, for example, or parts of Devon, and regeneration areas like large parts of Northumberland.
It's interesting, Nick. I mean, obviously there will be considerable amount of money and effort and so on involved in reusing this currently very underused asset. Surely that in itself starts to bring about a sense of change within communities, I would imagine. I mean, what I was being told by Julian a couple of days ago was that the very fact that this looks as though this is now going to be developed has encouraged investment in, for example, local shopping centres and so on that otherwise wouldn't have been there. And so it's giving us sense that something is changing, which is surely very much what you're talking about, isn't it?
Perhaps I'm being cynical. I mean, I've been in this business for 50 Yes, it seems, and I know that so often what looks promising doesn't turn out because the costs end up being much higher. Consultants often manipulate the costs initially just to get the project through, and then the real awful realities come about. And money is, in a sense, it's the best being the enemy of the good. Whereas if you start by saying, look, it would be worth spending X, however small X is, but let's assume that it's worth spending 20 million on improving connectivity, as opposed to, I don't know what, 75 million or whatever the scheme is likely to cost, possibly quite a lot more. It seems to me then you can start saying, okay, how would I spend that to achieve the best results and fastest results and make an impact? And then we made a little film called It's the Little Things That Count, because we found that when we did market research and interviewed people, people were primarily concerned about things like dog shit, getting to the bus station and so on. So if you can start by ameliorating the things that are uppermost in people's minds, so as I say, distinguishing between the newcomers who will have one set of values, the young people who are at different ages and different classes, you can then, I think, begin to pull together a realistic menu of possibilities. Then you can engage people, not in an abstract way, but in a way that really does give a sense of ownership. I think, as I said, there's far too much naivety, but it's fueled by this ridiculous system that we've developed in this country for planning projects, which sounds terribly plausible. I mean, the sort of scheme I might have devised myself when I was at McKinsey 30 years ago. I'd never promote it now, I'm afraid. So it's courses, if you like, that I'm trying to argue for, which was the origins of the light rail concept in the 1890s, which was all about how to produce cheaper rail systems in rural areas. And I think this is effectively what you get in Germany with tram trains and so on. And because we said, oh, the whole country has to be treated equally, we ended up with a system which is totally unequal and which leads to classes feuding with each other. And creating
am I understanding it correctly, Nick? Your primary objection to this is it's heavy rail and not light rail?
Well, my primary objection is it's going to be high cost rather than low cost. So the term heavy rail,
right.
It's oh dear.
Does I mean, somebody raised the Transport for New Homes report, in the discussion, and I think a lot of these councils in the Northeast have, including Northumberland and Newcastle, have declared things like climate emergencies in the last couple of years. And I don't think they're thinking seriously about how land use planning could be used as a tool to reduce emissions from things like transport. They think of transport as a separate thing, and don't necessarily think of those interactions between where you put homes and the modes of transport that people will use as a result of that. So I think this kind of connected cities idea is a great way to focus minds on how you can transform away from that disconnect between land use and transport planning and put things together.
Right, which means we must start with spatial plans, and we must start with the things that people could do in half a day with a few maps before we get into starting thinking about how to spend large sums of money. And then it's the sort of cart before the horse problem, which is all because of our centralized financing system and the dominance of a sort of imperial approach to life.
I think, Nick, the situation is that, yes, that was the way it was done in the past. But I think there's also now a feeling that actually all these different initiatives, so the transport and the growth and all the other things, have to be integrated. And really the best way to do that, I mean, London is a great example. And I think the opportunity area planning frameworks, which took a sort of larger area and said, right, there's opportunity for growth here. They would then look at the transport, see whether it was sufficient or how it needed to be tinkered with to be improved. It would do viability assessments to establish just how many homes or how much office space you might put into an area. And so if you think about everything together, you evolve something that is much more holistic and that isn't necessarily just dominated by one mode, i.e. railway investment, but is actually bringing together many strands, you know, and it's also education and health provision and social services and all the rest.
Can I just I'd like to just say, I think in the last 15 years, half of the new housing developments have been nowhere near railway stations. And my observation is that those that are near railways tend to find it very difficult to connect to the railway. And that's partly because it's a bit of a sort of black art dealing with the railway. It's partly because developers don't really know what Network Rail wants. And when they do find out, they find it's shockingly expensive, or at least certainly when they weigh up the cost of a new station at 10, 20 million pounds against the idea of perhaps laying on a bus service or a few extra roads. It's a an easy win for them to just put the roads in, and I think we have to really win the argument on the public opportunities in terms of getting people to jobs and jobs to people. We need to win the argument in terms of environment, cutting out the carbon, and we need to really kind of encourage people to think better in terms of connectivity. That isn't so dependent on building more roads.
Okay, absolutely. But oh, sorry, am I speaking now? I'm not sure.
Yes, you are.
Yes. We have 1 minute to go. Is that correct?
No, Brian, I'm sorry. We've closed the breakout groups, and your discussion was very interesting, and nobody wanted to interrupt it. But I think we should move on to the proper feedback session now.
Yes. Okay. If we could do that, please. Yeah. So, hello everybody. I trust we're all back together again now. At this point, we would be very grateful for the hosts, as it were, of the individual breakout rooms to give us very brief feedback, only a couple of minutes, on the kind of discussions that took place in their sections. So could I ask Stuart and Andy, please, to give us some feedback?
You want me to go first, Stuart?
Yes, you can do, Andy.
Yeah. All right. So basically, I think we got cut off in our prime. I think there, as we're just about to discuss rolling stock, I believe, was the next question. But I think the first question was about the scheme and why it doesn't at the moment, the scheme as it stands doesn't consider extensions through to Woodhorn. And we've explained why that's the case. It's a sensitivity test that we've looked at in the past. There are good reasons for going and extending it to Woodhorn, but unfortunately there are some disproportionate costs involved in extending it to Woodhorn, which don't play well into the business case arena. The next question was all about access. I mean, I don't think it's escaped people's attention that the two stations serving the community of Blyth are located on the edge of Blyth, because that's where the railway goes. And so, you know, there is a unique emphasis on getting access for the good people of Blyth to the railway. And what are the plans for doing that? So, you know, this is all about active travel. This is all about encouraging people to use a bus. The current bus network is one that gets channeled past the two station sites, just the way that the buses work there. So that works in our favour a little bit. Clearly, the environment in which bus services are procured mean that it's difficult to force bus operators to perhaps route into a bus rail interchange that we set up, but discussions can be had. We're hopeful that you know, you can have that intelligent conversation with the bus operators, and they can see the benefits of doing so. And then, yeah, and the final question, which we were cut off on, Stuart was just about to enlighten us about rolling stock. Sorry, Stuart.
So yeah, I think I raised this in my presentation at the start, that I think having declared a climate emergency and got a detailed climate action plan in place, the last thing ideally we'd want to do is reintroduce diesel rolling stock onto the line. So there are a range of alternative modes out there in terms of bi-mode, in terms of battery electric, this, that and the other. So we are engaging with the market to see what opportunities are out there. So watch this space. I think, yeah, we're keen that because if we do introduce diesel rolling stock, I'm sure that wouldn't quite offset the emissions we're saving by taking the cars off the road. So we need to think differently, we need to think big, and we are doing.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, it sounds like you had a pretty full time. Yeah. Right. Thank you, Julian. Could you give us a rundown on what happened in your section, please?
Yeah, no problem. So the first question was around what's going to be the biggest influence of on the communities from the railway, and I think that really it's different in different parts of the railway. So in Ashington, certainly the sense that we got from the public consultation was that people in Ashington really felt who was interested in them. Why would anybody be interested in Ashington? And I think what this will do is actually very much put Ashington on the map. Interestingly, from the demand forecast, we're seeing almost as many people traveling into Ashington in the morning as heading south from Ashington in the morning. So I think it'll just really create a sense of place and a sense of value, and also it will stimulate, I think, some fairly major local development in the immediate environment of the station. In Seam Delaval, for example, when we got the public consultation, we got a real sense that here was an area with lots of young people with no hope, with no opportunity, and certainly looking at the demographic layout of the line, if you like, what you see is that there's quite a lot of people up to sort of 20s, and then they disappear, and then they come back when about sort of 60. And the clear sort of inference there is that between that sort of mid-20s to late 50s, there's a whole sort of almost half a population's worth are not there because they've disappeared to somewhere else. So I think the real hope is that we can create an opportunity through this railway of creating a sense of grounding, and there's very strong local family groups there, and we can enable people to stay with their families but find the work where they need to. There was one other comment about how can we sell railways to councillors, and this is in particular relation to the Garden Villages report that was referred to earlier, and I think I sort of touched upon that just 5-10 minutes ago.
Thank you very much. Excellent. So, Kieran and Paul, could you report back, please?
Yeah, I think I'll take that because Kieran struggled to get in for a little while into the chat room. Okay. We had some good questions, very good questions on implementation of the project. Who and how effectively was, I would summarise that as, in terms of whether it would be Network Rail who would implement it, or whether it would be done by others. And I explained that the intention is that it will be done by others under a design and build contract, and that Network Rail would continue to act as the ASPRO approving and reviewing role to facilitate the works. That's our assumption about how it's going to be done. And there was questions about ASPRO and how well that's working, and obviously people are coming. I think people have some horror stories about how ASPRO works well or not, as the case may be. So I was able to emphasise that that's not the case on this project, and Network Rail have been really, really supportive. Which is fantastic for us as designers. And then we had a really interesting input from one of the guys on the group, Steve, who's actually grew up at Bedlington and Furnace Way sidings particularly, so very, very familiar with the area and very familiar with the risk of people abusing the level crossings based on his local knowledge, and therefore asking about awareness campaigns that we're probably going to have to do as we start to introduce more trains which in effect, the new trains themselves will act as a bit more of a deterrent actually, because there will be more trains on the line. So hopefully people will be less likely to take a risk. However, if they do, it might be more costly. So yeah, there's we're looking obviously to reduce risk with the crossings, but still the awareness campaigns are going to be a critical part of the project, as it gets towards implementation. So I think that sums up the 3 or 4 subjects that we covered.
Thank you very much. And Camilla, could you give us a rundown, please, of yours?
Yeah, so I think one of the first points that was raised is that this is an area of economic decline, and the difficulty of sort of engaging, particularly with the former mining community, and is building an expensive railway the right way to engage with them, was sort of, I think, the question. There was another question about whether it would be appropriate to perhaps spend small amounts of money on sort of visible things that would improve connectivity, that would have a real impact on people's lives locally, and that would be a sort of better way of spending money. That was one sense. But to sort of give local people a sense of ownership of what's happening. There was a sort of an objection from one of the people about sort of the high cost, the very high investment in rail. And I suppose probably my personal view on that is that, yes, railway projects are expensive, but they have a very much longer life than highways or other forms of transport. So, you can easily say, well, if you spread the cost over, 100 or 150 years, it's actually relatively low cost investment, but it is big money up front. And the last thing we were talking about just before we got cut off was the sort of lack of integration, that actually things are happening at the moment kind of in silos and separately, and that really to get a really good community going here, you need all the aspects. So it's not just the transport and the railway that needs to be considered, but it needs to be considered with spatial planning and land use planning, and all sorts of other things, environmental issues and social issues as well. But these things need to be integrated. And I sort of highlighted the fact that, London has done this fairly effectively under the mayoralship in London, where all different aspects, all the policies are cross-cutting. And so whenever a development is being considered, you're thinking about everything, not just thinking about railway or about housing numbers or whatever. So I think that's where we got to when we got cut off.
Thank you very much. We have actually used quite a lot of our allocated time. There's probably time for one question. Would anybody care to really drop a bombshell in the middle of all this and pose something that affects everybody? Any inspirations out there, please?
I'll do it if somebody.
Okay.
And if people can they hear? Given that the planning system at the moment separates land use from public transport, what are we going to do about it? Because until that's changed, it's going to be really hard to make progress with the Connected Cities model. So what should we do? There we go.
Would anybody care to respond to that?
I guess from my...
Yes, please, Stuart, go ahead.
Local authority, the real challenge is that, long-term transport planning and long-term spatial planning within a short-term political environment is just really challenging. And that's just, the final presentation, talking about the development opportunities in terms of around Blythe and Ashington and what have you, think, well, fantastic. But, for the last 3 or 4 years, that's been designated as green belt, and, a change in political administration really constrains the opportunity to do things like that. And I guess that's a frustration of being a long-term transport planner, is how we work in that environment.
A question has just appeared on chat, which kind of follows on from that, which is from Ginny Leonard that says, is this likely to be a scheme that government will prioritise to help stimulate the economy and make good on their political promises to the northeast? That seems a very relevant topic on which to end. So well, certainly Stuart, I'm sure you have opinions, but everybody else?
We're certainly hopeful and have had lots of positive noises and positive discussions, and we're positioning ourselves as well as we can to be ready to respond to if government make that offer to us. Or so yeah, we're positive. You can't commit to anything just now, but there's been a lot of positive noises, and yeah, let's just see how it goes. And I guess, you know, by luck or by whatever, you know, the fact that the Blythe Valley constituency changed from, was one of the red wall constituencies to change back in December, you know, perhaps was timely from a, you know, selfish perspective in the terms of this scheme.
Yes, I can see that the present government will feel it has to do something to reward its voters. So it's possible you may benefit from that.
Can I ask about COVID?
Anybody else like to comment before we wind up?
COVID?
COVID, yes, well, COVID's COVID, I'm not sure. The question being, will that impact on public transport?
Yes, we're all encouraged to use our cars at the moment as not public transport. I just wondered what impact that could have on connected cities, whether that could actually throw a spanner in the works.
Well, the answer, of course, is that nobody knows. And I don't, you know, have a crystal ball, and nor does anybody else on the planet, I guess. However, I'm reasonably confident that in the long run it will work through. Not least, it's because what's happening right now is effectively the government has nationalised public transport, since it's digging into its pockets in order to keep it running. And I think what may happen is that there's a kind of change of attitude that comes about as a result of this, in which public transport is seen as being a core service along with the NHS and so on. And so it could well be that in some completely strange and unexpected way, it actually proves to be a great benefit. Although I do agree entirely, at the short term, it seems to be not encouraging. But I have faith that this will somehow resolve itself, because in the long run, it is a solution that we need. I can't see any other. Yeah. Right. Well, we're exactly at 5:30, so we'll be winding up now. I would like to thank everybody enormously for all the input that you have had. There will be a video of this, or videos, because they'll be edited down a little bit. We would like to, if you're interested, direct you to the Connected Cities website, which is this. And again, if you Google it, it's all one word, Connected Cities. We also, this is a big run up to events. So in about a month's time, we'll be dealing with the Rochdale Road corridor, which has got some very exciting developments going on there. Metro West in Bristol and Oxford Metro are both schemes that have been around for a long time and are just on the verge of coming to fruition. But as ever, there are always lots of hiccups along the way. So we'll be looking at those later on in August and in September. And then finally, on Monday, the 5th of October in London Euston, we look to coming to hear what Sir Peter Hendy, Chairman of Network Rail, has to say about all this. And because by willing, we will actually have the results of the review by then. And how it interlocks, because Peter Hendy invented the idea of metroisation. It's his phrase, and it's something that he's promoting. So I think there's a real opportunity, and it's been enormously educational for myself, and I'm sure others, to get an understanding of what really this involves. And it strikes me that the Northumberland line is a wonderfully good example of grasping the bull by the horns and actually getting on and doing it. So I would like to thank everybody for here. I wish you a good day. It's a beautiful day outside. It's an opportunity to sit in the sunshine and drink liquids, and I'm sure you enjoy it. If you would like to be included in our email list that we will send out, please do write your full email address into chat now. We will send out a list of all the attendees, but we'll only include the email addresses of those people who write their email address in chat at this moment, for obvious reasons of security and privacy and so forth. So once again, thank you very much. If you'd like to tell us anything about how you liked, disliked, or can think of better ways of doing what we're doing, we'd be immensely grateful if you would tell us. On the screen is my email address. Do please up to it, or you can actually connect us obviously through the website. So thank you very much. Really appreciate the speakers for all their enormously hard work in preparing this and getting together in groups and working out all the details of how they will interact one with another. And for all of the great deal of preparation that went along behind the scenes as well. So thank you very much. Thank you for attending and have a wonderful week. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers now.
Cheers.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John would also like any feedback on technical issues. Always, he's constantly honing this process. So,
never quite successfully, but we get a bit closer each time.
No, I thought it worked extremely well. I mean, we have one or two minor unexpected events, but generally speaking, I would say it pulled together. I mean, it's inevitable that somebody somewhere like myself, you know, forgets to unmute their a mic and that kind of thing in the rush of the moment. Yeah, I thought it went very well. Thank you.
Could I just ask a quick?
Sorry, Mark, go ahead.
Am I too late? Sorry. When you asked any final questions, I had one, but I couldn't unmute my thing quick enough either, so I missed it. It may not be relevant.
Right.
But I did wonder if there had been any consideration of, you know, providing services through to Morpeth. I saw, you know, there's a line that goes up that way as well, or to run northwards up the coast mainly.
I understand from the team. Well, are any of the teams still here? I don't think they are.
Six of us at the moment.
Yeah, that's right. The answer is yes. They've looked at all sorts of options. I mean, as you saw in the diagram that was shown, I think in the second presentation, you have to go through a series of hoops, and they're quite a long way advanced. But a couple of years ago, they were looking at many different options and trying to get a sense of what was most cost effective, what was achievable, where the pitfalls lay and where the benefits lay. And yes, certainly that is the kind of thing that's going to have to be part of a phase 2 or a phase 3. Many schemes, if you go onto the internet, you can find lots of schemes, some of which were clearly quite well funded in working out opportunities for not only extending the metro, but increasing rail services generally. Because given that northeast of England was where railways began pretty much, there's a wonderful legacy there, but it's not greatly used. And there still are lots of strange spare bits of line running from nowhere to nowhere in Tyne and Wear area we discovered when we were looking at all the rail routes. So I'm sorry I can't give you a definitive answer, Mark, but I mean, Kieran might be able to give you that answer, or Stuart. Actually, Stuart probably is the person who give you
yes, well,
clearest,
that's who I was expecting to ask if I'd managed to find out how to unmute quick enough. So anyway, but thanks for trying.
Okay, well, I'm sure
I can
you'll
maybe
be with us next time.
No, thank you. Anyway, very interesting. Thank you. Okay. Right.
Okay.
Bye.
Cheers. Thanks a lot.
I'll try and write something up about it all. Anyway. Okay.
Brilliant. No, it'd be greatly appreciated.
I can get in touch with you for any other questions I've got, can't I? Presumably.
Yeah. Really don't. Yeah. I mean, any questions you got, shoot them up on an email or give me a ring, and we'll take it from there.
Okay.
No, it'd be really
right.
good. Thank you.
Okay. Bye. Thank you.
Okay. Cheers.
Right.
Okay. I think we really are done.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Great. Everybody, goodbye, and thank you once again for a fabulous job well done. Cheers.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank
you. Brilliant.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye.